Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, the podcast for writers who strive to be bold and readers who crave something new. I'm your host, Jonathan Ball. I want to thank you for being here, and I want us to stay in touch. So subscribe to this podcast, then go to writingthewrongway.com and enter your best email to receive the Martian Embassy Missive, my bi-weekly newsletter where I let you know what's happening on Mars, where we're always making big plans. Join the Martians so you don't get left out of the invasion at writingthewrongway.com. And as a special bonus, I'll send you a free book. Speaking of books, my new book is called The National Gallery, and it contains sonnets about Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, elegies lamenting the death of my iPhone, and other strange missives from yours truly, the Poet Laureate of Hell. Visit thenationalgallery.ca to order your signed copy. That's thenationalgallery.ca. I'm talking to Jordan Patrick Finn, and Jordan is the author of Hellcraft, a comic what would you call it, an anthology almost, but it follows a single character.
Yeah, it's a collection of 4 issues. I call it a graphic novel just because that's easier for people who don't really know comics, just to get into what it is.
Sure, and it does have a flow from one issue to the next. Although they're self-contained stories, they do sort of build on each other. So I think it does kind of work as a graphic novel as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely wrote the first couple as standalones, but I mean there are definitely connecting threads and stuff.
Now I'd like to come back and talk more about Hellcraft a little later, but first I want to just talk about the new thing you've got coming out, Death Kanji. So I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit more about yourself and how you kind of got into comics writing, and about this project Death Kanji and what we can expect from it.
Okay, sure. About myself, there's not too much to tell, but basically I got into comics just from the way that I think everyone would, reading big 2 books and just wanting to do it myself, and then following advice of creators online and interviews and convention panels and stuff that I saw was just do it. Just make a comic. There's no other excuses. If you want to make comics, the way to do it is to make comics. So I just took that advice and just did that.
Now, let me just stop you there for 1 second, because I do hear this a lot, and I do think it is good advice, but also I think, like myself as a writer who's moving into comics, I think there's an easy objection, and there is an easy reason not to do it, which is you're a writer. So can you get a little bit into how you overcame the fact that you're not the artist? And this is comics?
I absolutely can. Yeah, I just went online just to find artists. Basically, I saved up enough money and shopped around for rates and spoke to a couple artists and found one that I thought would suit the project pretty well and that I could afford his page rate, and just went from there. Because, yeah, like you said, writers, it's harder for a writer to just decide to do it because you need to pay somebody to do it. But yeah, I just got a little extra cash and invested in myself, I suppose.
So what led you to that point? Because I find that a lot of people will talk about doing that, but they won't take that step, especially when money is involved, and they really do have to pay somebody if they want some good quality art. It's not that nobody would do it for free, but the people who would do it for free generally can't, they can't afford to do it for free because they're busy with other things. So I'm just curious to know, what got you to that point where you really had just the drive to do it, as opposed to what so many people do, which is think about it, talk about it. What kind of made the difference for you? Because I find that that's an interesting question to me. When I meet people, whether they're emerging or established or whatever they are in their career, there's just this difference between the people who are just talking and talking and talking about all the things they're going to do, and the people who are actually out there doing something, good or bad, what have you. But they're actually taking that leap, which is not a small leap.
Well, thanks for saying so. I honestly don't know what pushed me over. I was just, at the time, I was writing sort of fan scripts or ideas for Marvel stuff. I really, really wanted to write certain Marvel books, like the Inhumans. I was like, oh my God, I have such a good Inhuman story to tell. And then I just thought, I'm not going to get hired by Marvel to write the Inhumans because I've never written anything ever before. So I don't know. I just thought of ideas of my own my own characters, my own worlds, my own stories to tell, and it was just eating me up inside. I suppose that's kind of the answer. I just had to get them out. Do you know what I mean? Where some people will sit on the stories and be like, I want to. I had to. Like I had felt a compulsion and a drive to actually get a comic made and to see words that I put down become images by someone who can draw. That's not me. So I don't have a concrete answer for you on that question, but yeah.
It's an interesting way to put it. You know, you kind of had to, and you had this maybe obsessiveness about it, perhaps because of so much of the stuff you've done ties into Lovecraft in a certain way, but also maybe more pointedly into that sort of obsessive character, you know, that so often populates the Lovecraft story, where this person just is sort of, they have an inkling of a thing that's out there that they could connect into, and they have a drive sort of towards it, whether they understand it or not, and they're making these sorts of moves. So I think it's just interesting to kind of see that. Now in Lovecraft, of course, it always ends badly.
Well, whereas, in my books, it might end badly too.
But hopefully, for you as a person in the world,
a person,
it is ending well. So let's maybe just fast forward to Death Kanji a bit, though, before we kind of come back to that earlier stuff. So can you tell us a little bit about Death Kanji and like what that story is and what else, and how we could get connected to it?
Of course, yeah. Well, as you've alluded to, my work is definitely inspired by Lovecraft. I kind of ate from his work a lot, and Death Kanji is certainly no exception. It's I like to think of it in my head as calling it an adaptation of the Dunwich Horror, as much as maybe a movie like Annihilation is an adaptation of The Color Out of Space. Do you know what I mean? Where it kind of, sort of is. It's using elements of that story, but it's telling its own story. So that sat in my head for a couple years. Mostly the way that I write comics, because I've only made like a couple, is I have the ideas and I jot them all down in my notes, and then after they sit there for a year, I go, okay, this is the one. I pick one idea. So Death Kanji was one out of like a bunch of different books that I thought I could make. And after the success of Hellcraft, a year before I was writing Death Kanji, Hellcraft raised $5,000 Canadian on Kickstarter. So I figured, okay, I want to make Death Kanji. I know this is the story I want to tell, and I know that I can do a Kickstarter successfully. I know that it's possible for me to raise money on Kickstarter. So that is my plan for Death Kanji, which will be launching on Kickstarter July 13th. That's 2020 is the year that this podcast is being recorded. So yeah, that's where that's going to be and where it can be found. I don't have a Kickstarter like preview page or anything up yet, but I mean, my Twitter is where I post all of my own news, basically, which is at Jordan P. Finn, if anybody is interested in this book. And
Finn, of course, is with two N's.
Yes. Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit about the story of Death Kanji?
Yeah.
What the story is about?
Absolutely. Sorry. So the story is it's about this samurai, and it's about his quest for knowledge, as you were referring with Lovecraft's characters having this drive or pursuit to find information. So it's about this samurai being tasked by his lord to find information about the lord's family and his heritage. So he has to go out and look for clues and information. It's about whether the search for knowledge maybe is not always a good thing, and you might not always like what you find. It's also about sort of the duty that he has as a samurai, because that really fascinated me about this feudal Japanese system of how their code of honor interacts with each other, how the samurai has to interact with the people around him because of his code, and what might cause him to break that in terms of what information he finds.
It's interesting to tie up samurai and Lovecraft and kind of make that connection, because using a samurai character that has that sort of sense of duty, as you say, the duty to act in certain ways,
Yes.
and in certain respects and along a certain path, is very much the precise type of character that is missing in the Lovecraft story. Like in Lovecraft, you so often have these characters who are just witnesses. They're pursuing knowledge, they get the knowledge.
Yes, there's a lot of reaction.
There's a lot of reaction and passiveness and kind of witnessing. And the stories often just sort of fizzle out in a certain
they just
respect.
end with the character finds something out and it just ends. They're like, okay, we're doomed and there's nothing we're going to do about it.
Yeah, and not necessarily that, I mean, you haven't taken, without getting into details, I mean, you haven't taken into this Marvel big DC big 2 kind of arena where, now he's going to go save the universe.
Oh, no.
Or
it's
anything
definitely
like
like,
that.
can you even do anything about it? Probably not, but if you feel the need to act in some way, what do you do when that situation arises?
And how does one deal with that sense of necessity, the necessity for action, as opposed to the kind of Lovecraftian, I'm just a scientist. I just report on the facts of the universe, and there's a neutrality.
I just write down all the things that I don't want anyone ever else to know other than me. Yeah,
exactly. As if that was a great idea.
Yeah.
If only, hopefully, nobody writes this down. Is my favorite trope in the Lovecraft story. Although I'm a great admirer of Lovecraft. So, and as are you. So what is it that attracts you? Of course, because not only this Death Kanji has this Lovecraftian influence, but of course, Hellcraft is very explicitly set in this sort of Lovecraftian cosmos with this, in some ways, taking and reshaping and connecting very clearly into particular Lovecraft, stories and in these particular Lovecraft characters. Unlike in Death Kanji, where you're not really doing that, but in Hellcraft you really are. You have kind of this interesting like investigator character of your own device, and then plugging that character into sort of this Lovecraftian world. What attracted you initially to like the Lovecraft cosmos, I guess you'd say, and that whole sort of method of producing horror?
I think probably the hopelessness of it is what attracts me most to his mythology. Is just that there are things bigger than humanity, bigger than Earth out there that we can't do anything about. It's outside of our ability to comprehend and fathom or to take any action to deal with properly. You know what I mean?
So what would you find interesting? Did you just find that as an interesting aspect, or is there some like particular reason that interests you? That is in some ways my attraction to Lovecraft as well, is this weird sublime quality that the creatures have. And the way there's just this, I don't know, it's a very interesting and I'm also a big admirer of Ligotti, and Ligotti is very, tapped into that same sort of vein of there's a certain absurdity and hopelessness in the scenario, which is interesting.
So sorry, what's exactly the question?
I guess like the question is like, is there something else in particular that kind of takes you, it keeps you like so interested in Lovecraft? Because in some ways what you're doing in Death Kanji is really departing from as I say, the Lovecraftian mold as well. Again, with this character who sort of has this duty to take an action as opposed to just observe.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you think so, because as I wrote it, I became very worried that I was just becoming too one note, doing another sort of Lovecraft sort of thing with my second book. I was very, very attracted to that hopelessness, that despair. I guess I'm sort of accidentally a pessimist now. Partially because of Lovecraft, but that's what really got me into his work some years ago when I decided to start writing Hellcraft, which was 2012 or something. I was very sort of new to the mythos at that time and super, super attracted to it, and I still am. I'm still very much a Lovecraft fan, but I do like the idea of growing past that a little bit.
Have you, and what kind of led you to the samurai in particular? You know, what about that kind of type of story and its sort of, you know, tropes did you feel was interesting or attractive to you?
I think it was the Kurosawa films. At the time that I was inspired to write Death Kanji, there was I think there was a free month or something of the Criterion Channel new streaming service. So I got that and just watched all the Kurosawa movies on there, and just watching all of those, and also going and sitting down and reading more Lovecraft short stories, just sort of slammed together in my brain subconsciously, and Death Kanji came out.
You know, it's interesting to me to look at Death Kanji personally as a massive, you know, fan of Lovecraft and somebody who's studied horror, you know, like in university and taught horror classes. But also back in my, you know, misspent youth, I was hired to write 4 samurai movies, you know, and which, you know, never really ended up getting produced necessarily. But what I found was so interesting about the samurai story concepts was how malleable and flexible that figure was. Like, it seems so it seemed initially when I first was kind of getting into it that this is maybe kind of a one note thing, the samurai you know, saga kind of storyline, but it really does have a kind of really interesting flexibility that as you have kind of done allows it to marry up to other things like, you know, this Lovecraftian sort of cosmology or whatnot.
Well, certainly, yeah. Especially in film, where Samurai is so close to westerns. Like, you could tell a million different kinds of westerns. Like, a cowboy is not one specific thing. It goes the same for the samurai, I think.
Now, can you talk a bit about when you were making Hellcraft? So you had initially, again, got to the point where you're out there looking for an artist. What sort of turns you on to the artists that you've managed to find for these projects? And like, what was the thing that kind of attracted you about their artwork in particular?
Difficult question to answer. The biggest attractor for me was that he was Canadian, actually. I guess I'm a bit of a patriot. I like to hire other Canadian creators. It is the same line artist on both of these books, so on Hellcraft and of Death Kanji, a guy named Greg Woronchak, who was in Montreal when I hired him. So that was the biggest thing. But then beyond that, he would do his own pencils and inks, which I guess is commonplace now. But when I was looking, there were a lot of pencilers and inkers. I kind of just wanted the smallest team that I could possibly get. So I just wanted one artist. And I felt that he had enough expressiveness in his faces. I think that the faces that he draws are really excellent when it comes to reactions. You know, when characters are frightened or confused by the things that they're looking at, you can see that really, really clearly in his line art, which was definitely a big seller for Hellcraft. I thought that was really important for that book.
You know, he really is an interesting artist, and in Death Kanji, the style is really developed in an interesting way.
Certainly. And you can see that in the Hellcraft book, basically because I wrote it and he drew it over the course of many different years, because it's a 4-issue collection. I would do one in 2012, one in 2014, or whenever it was. I forget the dates, but you can see definitely the evolution of his art between those 4 issues for sure.
Especially when you start getting to the 4th issue and some of the sort of paneling even in that issue is really impressive and, you know, uncommon in places.
Yeah, definitely.
And now in terms of were you writing Hellcraft as well in kind of a Marvel method style script, or did you have more of a traditional full script for that?
For that one, we went back and forth. I did a test before the 4 issues that are collected in Hellcraft. We did a test like 10 page or 8 page just to see how we work together and if Hellcraft would work on a page, which I haven't shown basically to anyone because that was the first thing I've ever written and it's very bad. But maybe I'll show it one day because the art's still fine. So with that one, I wrote full script. because it was my first script, my first time working with the artist. I thought that was necessary. And then basically as we decided to move on and write a bigger issues, I spoke to him about it. He prefers Marvel Method. Some artists that I speak to want full scripts. Greg always wants Marvel Method, which I'm totally comfortable doing, basically because I have seen our results, because I have seen him work off a full script, and I'm comfortable with him telling his own sort of, or using his own sort of pacing, not telling his own story, but using his own pacing and paneling. I know that I don't have to worry about that because he's fine at it. Like he's good. He's definitely better than me. Do you know what I mean? I feel like artists or writers tend to push their own ideas onto a professional artist when the artist has the better eye for art. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
They are definitely more qualified to speak about paneling than I am, without a doubt. So that was the first issue, and then I think the second I went back to full script. Just I don't know. I wanted to flex my muscles a little and full script it, and then I don't know. I flopped back and forth. I think third maybe was back to Marvel Method. It's difficult to remember. Some pages where I try to get creative with layouts, like in the middle of issue 3 of Hellcraft, there is this sort of floor plan kind of page sequence where I had to full script that, and an earlier one where they're walking down the stairs into the tomb. I would full script certain pages where I had very, very specific paneling in mind. But other than that, I just stick to Marvel Method with Greg, and he's happy, and I'm happy, and that works for us.
Now, we should probably just clarify for people who may don't know what Marvel Method is relative to full script, if you don't mind doing that quickly.
Absolutely, I can. So full script is sort of the normal way to script a comic, where the writer would write down page 1, 5 panels. Panel 1, it's a half-page panel, a medium shot of X character, and whatever. Panel 2 has this, blah, 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 and so on and so on and so on. Where Marvel Method is basically, I don't know how everyone specifically does it, but I break it down by page. I say page 1, this needs to happen. Page 2, this needs to happen. And then the artist takes that and decides on what the panels are, how many panels are in the page, basically on their own, just by you saying what needs to happen for the story to work. And then you take that back from them once they've done it and script it properly for your letterer to say, in panel 1, now this person will say this. And I definitely like that aspect because it lets you sort of react to exactly what the page is, exactly what the expression on the character's face is. Now you can adjust your script and say, oh, maybe he says it a little differently. Maybe now he looks like he's yelling a little more, so I need to add an exclamation at the end of this sentence rather than a period. So it lets you adjust as you go to what your artist is drawing.
Can you talk a bit about your compositional strategy in terms of, so you have talked a little bit about it, but can you just go a bit deeper into like how you would start building up the stories? So I myself am kind of thinking about this because I'm writing a book with the artist, with Grigory Kmichik as the artist. And we've got the same letter, Lyndon Redchenka, as you're going to be using on Death Kanji, if I recall correctly.
I am, yep.
And so I've developed a mad strategy where I first, start to lay out these cue cards. I'm doing like 22-page issues, so I'm kind of laying out cue cards for each page, and then figuring out what are my spreads, what are my page turns, what are the big beats, like you were talking about, almost in like a Marvel Method fashion. Then I'm going and writing a full script, sort of a full script, for each page, and then I'm having Lyndon put all the text and paneling on blank pages. Just to kind of illustrate the sort of pacing.
Yeah,
and
make sure there's not too many words on the page.
Yeah, like it's this weird sort of, I'm paying him a little extra to kind of do this extra step of like paneling and lettering these blank pages. And then, the artist is, he'll go with that or he won't go with that, is sort of, the agreement we've got. So it's a very sort of strange and kind of, mad kind of weird combination of like Marvel
That's
and
a
full script.
very interesting way to write it, to have the letterer do the panels before the artist gets to it. That's
He's
very
gonna,
unique.
He's going to go back and adjust them, but so
Yeah, of
again,
course,
I'm paying
of
a little
course.
extra for him to do this extra work and stuff. But what it's kind of been doing for us is like it gets sort of that sense of what's the pacing I'm kind of thinking through, and what's sort of the visual approach I'm kind of thinking of it a bit more concretely. Even if the artist doesn't want to go in that direction, he kind of knows where I'm at, because it is also a horror, and to me, it's so much about tone and atmosphere, more than and the pacing. I feel like it really plays
pace
into
for
that.
sure. That's what I was going to say. Pacing is so important when it comes to horror.
Anyway, what I found is like, so I'm just because comics don't have a standard format in the same way that say screenplays do. There's so much flexibility to kind of do a different thing. Like we have these kind of Marvel and full script we were talking about, but I mean there isn't a standardized, templates you could buy that is 100% what everybody uses. They're all kind of using these weird ad hoc, vague versions. So for me, then that just became like my little. Here's my like way to get this process of scripting to somehow mirror or overcome what I feel is like the issues I'm kind of encountering as a writer, say. So I'm just wondering if there's any like things you were kind of doing as you were like kind of writing your first comics and kind of learning what this medium is in some respects as a writer. Were there kind of things you found yourself doing or trying, or just kind of redoing that really where either you found a tip that worked or just there was a learning curve you felt you had to get over?
That is a really difficult question. What was I doing in my early drafts?
How did you find them changing the process?
How did I change? Well, the easy answer is in the first test mock-up of the first 10-page Hellcraft story that I told. I used I'm blanking on the word. Basically, thought bubbles, captions,
sure.
Narration, and that didn't work. That was too heavy-handed for that story. It was a little too sort of Sin City, the guy narrating his detective adventure, and that didn't work for that particular story. So that's the easy answer. That's the thing that I changed right away from that. But in terms of process, the other toss-up answer would be changing from full script to Marvel method, where I thought full scripting was very important. And the real answer is that it changes depending on who I'm working with. So if I'm working with Greg, I know that I have to write my script in a certain way for him to get. If I'm working with another artist, I need to probably do a full script depending on what they're asking. And then once I've gotten the pages back and I'm doing my lettering script for Lyndon or on Hellcraft for DC Hopkins, I need to. Well, I like to speak with them and ask their formatting preferences. Do you want the old one is, do you want dialogue in all caps, which letterers now just absolutely hate, right? Mm-hmm. So it's speaking to the people that you're working with to make sure that they are getting an easier job, that you're not making their job harder by any things that you are doing. Now,
how did you hook up with Lyndon as a letterer on this new project?
Lyndon, again, just because he was Canadian, that's what really drove me to be interested in him. I actually don't know how I found him. It was just a mutual interaction on Twitter, I think, and just somebody liked somebody's post, and we followed each other. And I asked him about lettering, and he gave me a good rate. And I said, "You're Canadian. You seem good to work with." And he actually, I assume you have the same experience, but he has been an absolute joy to work with. I would work with Lyndon again in a heartbeat. He is very excited and passionate about the project, which I deeply respect and admire.
Lyndon has two qualities that I think are essential in somebody who's a letterer. So one is he's absolutely a good letterer. One of the better ones I've seen, actually. But two, he does everything I tell him to do without complaining or whining about it or pushing back in it. some senseless manner. Does that make, you know what I mean? Like where
Oh, yeah,
sometimes if you're,
absolutely.
yeah. So
On one of these Death Kanji pages, I think I kept asking him to re-letter certain things. I was like, "Oh, can you move the balloon just a little bit over this way?" He's like, "Oh, like this," and I'm like, "No, that's not really what I meant. Like more kind of over the." And I just kept going and going, and I felt terrible about it. I hate doing that to a person I'm working with, but he didn't seem to mind. He was super positive the whole time.
have you ever had to have a art page redone? Because I haven't yet had this experience, but I am dreading the day when I get
Yeah.
some. You know what I mean? I'm wondering like how, if so, if you've ever had that experience, like how did you handle it?
I have. I dread it too. I feel horrible saying that kind of thing to an artist, saying, "Actually, this doesn't work, and you need to do it again." I absolutely hate that. But it has happened.
I mean, it's
I'm not sure that I should
happen.
share specifics. Basically,
Well, I'm just more thinking
Yeah.
about like what's your approach to dealing with the scenario, because it is a thing that's bound to
I-
happen. It doesn't mean the artist is doing anything
Yeah.
wrong necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Either.
Exactly.
But like,
My
how do you
approach is
approach
just to be very, very reluctant about it and send that email and say, "I'm sorry" at the top, and then say, just politely. But you have to know that basically it's your vision and you have to do it. Essentially, you can't let these things go. If the story is wrong, it has to be fixed. Now, there are some things where if it comes back not the way that I wanted or wrong in some respect, I can be like, "Oh, okay, I can rewrite it. This can be fine because of working with Marvel Method is no problem. I can just change the script. Like the script isn't even really written yet, so that's no issue." But you do have to set sort of a standard or a line in the sand and say, this has to be this certain way or the story doesn't work.
now,
Go ahead.
now you're talking about your having that vision clear in your head, and it seems to me so much. The more I kind of work in writing comics, and this is also, I have more experience in screenwriting, and it's also, I think, true in screenwriting, where so much of the job is not producing a literary document, so
But a
much,
blueprint,
but a
right?
blueprint, but also communicating that vision, like finding ways to communicate that vision to people. And so often when I see like a disconnect happening, it's usually my fault for not clearly communicating the vision. And it seems to me like that's an important quality, not just in, say, somebody's writing a comic book script, but also somebody who's going to do a thing like a Kickstarter, like you're doing. Like, so I'm curious to know, like, what are some of the ways that you've approached or you're planning to approach the Kickstarter in terms of how do you really get across, like, here's what it is I want to do in a kind of clear way where people can understand it and they can kind of, see the expansiveness of that vision and like the reason, why they might support it, but also like just understand clearly what it is.
Well, certainly, I think cultural touchstones help with that. For me to be able to say, "Hey, this is a book that's like Lovecraft a bit, and it's like Kurosawa films a bit." That kind of communicates really quickly. Okay, I have a vision of what this thing is. So those are easy descriptors to just throw out there, and there's an immediate vision of it. So you can use those definitely with your creative team before they work on it, and then, like you said, at the Kickstarter, to fans or potential customers, and say, these are quick reference points for you to know sort of what it is. And by the time like the Kickstarter's up, I share all these images so they have a direct, exact vision of this is what the pages look like, this is what the book looks like, this is the tone of it, this is how many sort of dialogue captions or not captions, balloons that will be on a page. I think that's another very important thing to communicate with a reader or during your Kickstarter is the tone of how much writing. Is this super heavy? Is there a lot of prose? Is there narration? You have to be very clear with your audience about that, and like you said, with your artists as well. So you definitely have to get all of them on board, which is just communicating the themes. I like to tell the people working on it sort of what the book is about in a broad sense, other than just specifically the beat by beat what happens in the story. I want them to know the kind of story that we're telling. You need to know that this is a horror deep down, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in Death Kanji that's kind of not horror. A lot of it is just sort of general drama. At least I think so. I don't know if you have the same take after reading my script, but you need to know, hey, artists, or hey, color or letterer, even though this is just, drama out in the Japanese countryside, this is a horror story. You need to know that while you're drawing it, or while you're doing whatever, just so you can strike that right tone.
Well, you've got, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about the details of the story because I'm not sure how you're planning to, convey that. But you do have certain moments in the story and in the script where, at an early part of the script, you'll be describing, say, this thing, and, it looks cute, but remember, later on, we'll find this other thing out. And, I mean, in a script, you can it is always worth just kind of trying to clearly communicate that kind of thing, because... Yeah,
you say that right up front. This is going to happen later in the story. Know this now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's of course, again, because the script is a blueprint, that's something you can just kind of be communicating in kind of plain language. But I think sometimes it's that... especially in a horror story, or a story that has like this connection to horror in terms of these really clear touchstones, like Lovecraft as a sort of influential touchstone. There's just these ways in which you've got these interesting misdirects kind of built into the script. Like, it seems like things are going to go in this direction because that's a sort of thing that's maybe more standard in the samurai story, for example. But remember, this is horror. By the time we get to the end, everything's going to have a very different turn,
a different and sour turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything you learned from the first Kickstarter that you're kind of taking into the second one, either in terms of things that you found worked better than you expected, or didn't work, or just changes you're making?
Absolutely. The biggest and fastest one was no more frivolous rewards. On the first one, I included all kinds of stuff that I will not include going forward if I do more Kickstarters, including T-shirts, posters. None of that is going to happen again, because shipping that stuff was an absolute nightmare. So that was the fastest thing that I learned after doing my Kickstarter, was let's not do rewards like this ever again. Let's stick with just the book, the digital version, of course, maybe like a card or something. But even then, just strip it down to absolute basics.
And of course, you're going to have them tiered, I assume, in like Kickstarter does, where you've got like a digital tier. I assume you're doing a print tier as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you're maybe, I mean, I don't know. Have you figured out some of your possible stretch goals, or at this point? We're talking relatively early compared to when the thing's going to go live, but.
No, the only stretch goal I have would be breaking even.
The shipping does kill you, eh? Like, people, every time when I talk to you about Kickstarter, is like, oh, I forgot about the shipping, or has some
Never
sort
forget. That would be a nightmare. The fact that shipping has to be included in your goal is just, it's a real pain in the ass on Kickstarter.
This is the, crazy... The particular thing I find really interesting about even a thing like a particular platform like Kickstarter is it really is the preparatory work is in some ways indistinguishable from the work you would do to take it to, say, Image Comics. Like, you still are getting that art done. You're still writing the script. Like, there's so much work before, the thing hits, a point where you can take it to someone.
And I think more, in fact, I think it's easier to do up a submission pitch to a publisher than it is to do up an entire Kickstarter page. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's my personal opinion on it.
Do you feel that that preparatory work is something that people underestimate? Like when you talk to other writers?
I suppose so. I think you're more right about underestimating the shipping. I think that's the biggest underestimation that new Kickstarter creators will make, is not expecting everything to cost so damn much to send to another country.
Yeah, especially another country, you know, because we're in Canada.
Yeah, international is very expensive.
And are you thinking ahead at this point to the next project, or are you just mired in this one at this point?
I would say mostly mired. I am thinking always about tons of different projects, but I'm trying to tunnel vision myself and say not until this one is done.
And those images that you're talking about, where like the sample page is a Death Kanji, so that's of course going to be on the Kickstarter page.
Yes.
Is there any other place that somebody can go find that material prior to the Kickstarter going live?
Like I said, my Twitter, I'm definitely posting them there, but I'm also posting them on Webtoons, which I assume a lot of people know what it is, but don't go there all the time. I tend not to go unless I'm uploading, to be honest. But that's just like a webcomic site, so you can search up Death Kanji on there, and they're definitely on there, posting every Monday until the Kickstarter releases.
And is Hellcraft still available in some form? How can people get connected to that?
Well, Hellcraft, it's a 4-issue collection. The first 3 issues are 20 pages each. The last one is 40 pages. So the first 3 issues I actually put online for free, up on that Webtoons same site that I'm posting Death Kanji at. So you can read the first 3 issues of it for free, or you can buy it. I have a Big Cartel page, jordanpatrickfinn.bigcartel. I also just set up a Gumroad, which I think was also my name, Jordan Patrick Finn, where I'm selling the digital, the PDF for $10.
And do you have your own core website, or do you just run off these store sites?
No, I used to, but hosting it just became too much of a pain. Well, basically, I wasn't generating enough traffic to justify spending the domain fees.
Now, I'm really interested, particularly in one aspect of Death Kanji, which is just the Death Kanji itself. So, yes. You have this sort of thing wherever the character kills somebody, or there's a fatality of any sort. The actual Death Kanji, is peers over. Can you just talk a little bit about, like, one, just quickly explain what Death Kanji even is, and two, kind of your decision to go with that?
Okay, well, kanji is, I guess, the written form of the Japanese language, or one of the written forms of it, where words are symbols, I guess is the way to phrase it. And I don't know where that idea came from. It just sort of, I don't know, appeared in my head one day, just the image of that appearing as like a samurai cuts through someone. I think certainly with the way certain violent scenes are in a lot of action comics these days, especially Mignola's work, like Hellboys and stuff, where the page where somebody is, punching a monster or whatever, that one panel will be all red. And I just love that, where the one action beat is just like alarming and bright, and it's just red. So I took that sort of aspect and applied it to a kanji. So when an action beat will appear when a samurai is slicing somebody, boom, this red kanji that's obviously not in world, but it's for the reader just to see and to understand that this is a violent panel.
Well, Lovecraft, Kurosawa, Mignola, as your 3 big influences there, certainly is a great pedigree, and I hope I just want to thank you for talking to me and letting us all know about this great Kickstarter, Death Kanji. I'll definitely be supporting it because you sold me at Lovecraft and Samurais.
Well, thank you.
So
thank you for.
I encourage people to do so as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.